Hi, this is Catherine Brown. Well, I've just been introduced, so you already know that. But I'm here to teach you a little class in legacy writing today. This is one of my favorite classes to teach because it's really, really important for you to leave your legacy behind in writing. So here we go. Give yourself a big pat on the back, first of all, for taking this class, because often writing about your life and retelling the stories that make your family and friends laugh, cry, or groan is something people mean to do but never get around to. My mother, for example, she could sniff out a tape recorder if you had it buried in your shoe. She said, "You've got that tape recorder, don't you be taping?" So unfortunately, I didn't get a whole lot of memories from my mom. This is why I know that it's very important for you to leave yours. And it's really fun. You have taken the first big step in saving these for posterity by taking this class today. So you've shown up, here you are. Now all you have to do is to write your stories. You'll be able to begin that process with what you learned today in this class, and I know you'll have fun with it. Alrighty, here we go. When I teach legacy writing in the OLLI room, that's normally full of students on the USCB Beaufort campus, I include a number of handouts. You'll see these during this PowerPoint demonstration. If you want to copy the material down and don't have time during class, the handouts will be posted on the Google site where you can visit and retrieve the information. So don't worry if you can't write it all down, and maybe you don't need to write any of it down. Just listen and have a good time. Alrighty, first of all, what exactly is legacy writing and how does it differ from memoir? It's a form of memoir that's written to leave a legacy for family and friends and not necessarily for publication, except if you want to, you can create a family album with your stories in it and perhaps a few photos from the family scrapbook, and I'll give you some resources for that later on. Alrighty, now here we go. The following explanation is going to clarify for you what exactly legacy writing is. I'm going to read this handout because it's so good, or this screen because it's really, really good. First of all, legacy writing is a way of documenting your life experiences, values, and opinions to share with others. It can be a cherished gift to family and loved ones and healing for the writers themselves. That's from Andrew Weil, or is it Andrew Weil? I'm never quite sure. MD, very, very well-known proponent of living a natural life. All right, here you go. What will your legacy be? Do the significant people in your life know what you have valued most, what you thought was your purpose, or what you learned about life as you lived it? Do they know how you navigated life's challenges, celebrated life's gifts, or how you simply enjoyed beauty every day? Do they know you have found benefits from challenges as well as from life's beauty? Do they know how you used your moments of reflection to make life course corrections? Legacy writing answers these questions and more for others and ourselves. When we make explicit our values, purpose, and beliefs about our life, as well as our desires for our dying and death, we answer questions that others may wish to ask but can't find the words. Our answers are rooted in our life stories of the past or life stories of significance in the present, and in passing on our wisdom, love, and blessings for the future. In the contemporary legacy writing, as with ancient writing, we write for generations now and generations to come. It isn't only presidents and public figures who wish to leave a legacy. Many other people want to know how their life has made a difference, that they have influenced someone or something. Legacy writing fulfills our desire for someone to know us at a profoundly deep and personal level. It really does all those things. Legacy writing is just so important, and you'll find out a little bit more about it during this class. Next, we will cover the characteristics of legacy writing, and I will read along and you can follow along on the screen. Legacy writing focuses on a brief period of time or a series of related events that the writer remembers. In contrast, a coverage of a great span of time, such as birth to now, would be an autobiography. That would not be memoir, and that would not be a legacy writing. Legacy writing retells the events and their impact in a personal way via the writer's contemplation about a meaning of these events in retrospect. You look back on your life and you have a different perspective now than you've had before in your earlier life. This is why writing legacy now is a good idea. Legacy writing centers on the understanding of why and how the resolutions of any issues written about are significant in the writer's life. Legacy writing follows narrative structure, including many of the usual elements of storytelling. In other words, setting, plot, development, imagery, conflict, characterization, foreshadowing, flashback, irony, and symbolism. And if you have any questions about any of those, just Google them and you'll get lots of information. Legacy writing reflects a fictional quality even though the story is true, because you use all of the components of fiction above. Legacy writing has an enhanced emotional level because it's the writer's own experience. That makes sense. Legacy writing often can be a therapeutic experience for the writer, especially when the memoir is of a crisis or survival situation. Legacy writing can be written solely for the writer, friends, and family without a thought of publication of any sort. Legacy writing can range from short story length, in other words, a chunk of remembering, to book length and anything in between. I am also a writing coach, and a number of my students have written memoirs, and they're starting to write legacy writing as well, just for family and friends, and have published, just self-published, and their family has been very happy that they've done this and included photos in them, etc. And legacy writing may be researched using memories, photos, interviews, genealogical information, public records, scrapbooks, attics, basements, etc. The Mormon Church Family History Library in Salt Lake City, www.familysearch.com, is a golden resource for family records. Also, of course, Ancestry.com. All right, next we will go to tips for legacy and memoir writers. Get my papers shuffled here. Okay, these are all very important, so rock and roll with me on those. And you will want to get this you want to download this when you have the opportunity to do this. All right, tips for legacy and memoir writers. The following is indeed the meat of this class, and I'll go through them one point at a time with examples. Alrighty, here we go. Legacy writing, in other words, memoir, is about a portion of life, not a whole life. Don't try to tell too much in too few pages. It's very daunting to try to sit down and write a memoir. And even legacy writing can feel daunting, though once you start, you're going to have such a good time, you're not going to be daunted at all. But you don't want to try to tell too much of a story at one time. Take this a story at a time, just a little chunk of memoir at a time, or a little chunk of legacy at a time. Write about it and then move on to the next one. Number 2, brainstorm to hone in on the slice of memory you want to expand upon. Try to recall names, places, descriptions, voices, conversations, and other things that will turn your piece into a fascinating story. Number 3, write your first draft quickly, from beginning to end. Don't worry about editing yet. Your job is to tell the story. And stay tuned, because I'm going to refute this in a minute, sort of. Number 4, use all your senses to write vividly. Seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, and tasting. Do this through using sensory memory to recreate a moment in time. And I have a wonderful exercise to learn how to write in a more sensory manner and to observe in a more sensory manner. I happen to live in Beaufort, and I happen to teach at the USC Beaufort campus, and we're on the water. We're on the Intercoastal Waterway, and we have a swing bridge that opens to let boats through whenever they come up or down the waterway. And so we love our swing bridge because if you happen to be late to a meeting, all you have to do is say, well, I got caught by the bridge, and move on. And, oh, well, yeah, that's all right. What I like to do when the swing bridge catches me, I like to be first on the bridge. I'll turn my car off, because sometimes you don't usually have to wait very long unless it's a barge, and a barge can be about 15 minutes, but just for a boat to go through doesn't take very long at all. However, what I will do is I'll turn my car off, get out of my car, go to the bridge, to the edge of the bridge railing. No, I don't jump off. To go to the bridge railing, I want to see, I use my senses. I want to see who is on that boat. I'm curious, I'm a writer. I want to see who's on that boat. I want to see if there's someone with them, what kind of boat is it. I want to hear, and I will hear the laughing gulls. Laughing gulls are absolutely everywhere around the river, and so you always hear the laughing gulls. Then you can smell always around the river. You can either smell, it smells fishy in high tide, and in low tide, it smells a whole lot like pluff mud. And if you have ever been to the low country of the southeastern United States, you know what pluff mud is. It's fermenting, decaying, and very fishy, and just a wonderful smell. People who were born here, they say, have pluff mud in their blood. Anyway, but I also like to, we're very, very humid in the South Carolina low country, and so the air is thick, and you can actually feel it on your face. And often you can taste the salt from the salt water in the air. And so that's a good way to enhance your sensory skills. I'm a travel writer. I've been a full-time travel writer for about 30 years now. And one of the things I love about travel writing is that in order to write, in order to write the story, when I get back from my trip, I have to relive it in my mind, and I have to relive it through sensory input. Let's say I have just been to New Orleans and I want to write about New Orleans, so I sit down to write the story. I have to revisit going to a cafe and biting into a beignet. And if you don't know what a beignet is, look it up and go get one, because they're wonderful. But you bite into a beignet and you're absolutely covered with powdered sugar. It's like a snowstorm. And so I get to relive that through sensory feel, and write it in my story just the way I felt it. So it's really important to get that sensory input in your story so your reader can really feel the senses that you're feeling, feel your emotions. Okay, number 5, select your story details carefully. Remember, the details of all our lives are different, but have universal themes. We all learn the same lessons, but in different ways. An example of that is how I learned that telling the truth was probably a real good idea. Back when I was a little tyke, I used to live in a small town with a small women's college right behind our house. And I was a little girl. I was about 5 when this happened, maybe 6. And my sister, who was 2.5 years older, let me tag along every once in a while, not often, but everybody else in the neighborhood were boys. And so I was the littlest in a crowd of my sister and a lot of little boys. And so one of the games that we would play is King of the Mountain. And we would play keep away. So the person who was it would climb up on, there was a first floor roof that you could climb up on, and then there was a classroom. The classroom windows were behind this first floor level. And so the guy who was it would climb up on the roof, and then we would throw rocks at him. Not hard, mind you. This was not an injury game, but we would throw rocks at him. And the first person who hit him then became it and would have to get up on the roof. Obviously, there was a way to get up on the roof easily. I never had to do that. Anyway, so my little 5-year-old self picked up her rock, and she was determined to hit that guy with it, and so she hauled it for all she was worth, and he ducked, of course, and it went straight through a classroom window and broke the window. The classroom was in session, and so everybody else ran. The guy jumped off the roof, and my sister ran, and all the little guys ran, and I was this little 5-year-old saying, why is everybody leaving? And so here comes the professor just fuming outside, and he came and he said, who threw that rock? Who threw that rock? And I said, I did. You know, little blonde, blue-eyed little girl. And he said, no, who threw that rock? And I said, I did. And he said, you did? You threw that rock? And he was flustered, and he said, well, just don't ever, you go on home and you just don't ever do that again. You know, that wasn't much punishment, so I realized, okay, telling the truth is all right. And you probably learned to tell the truth in a different way. It's write that story. That would be a good one. All righty, number 6. When writing memoir or legacy, send all those who are looking over your shoulder and criticizing your writing out to play. Dismiss them even if they happen to be your family. You must work within your own truth no matter what anyone else thinks of it. This is really, really important. This is really, really important. And this is number 6. I'm sorry, I've skipped 2. I've skipped 1. No, I haven't. All right, here we are. We're recording, and it's okay. So sorry. All right, number 6. When send your critic out to play is the gist of the whole thing. You must work within your own truth, no matter what anyone else thinks of it. And by that, I mean that if you and your sister or your brother happen to be in the same place, which you probably did when you were small, and experienced the same thing, you may remember it in a different way. You and I and everyone all have our own filters that we see life through. We're individuals. And so you are writing this story, you can ask your sister, or you can ask your cousin, or you can ask your brother what they thought about it, and maybe get some more detail for your story. But you're writing the story, so you get to use your own viewpoint in the story. That's very, very important. Remember that. You're the writer of the story, so you get to use your own viewpoint in it, no matter what. All righty, number 7. Okay, here comes the refute of what I mentioned a minute ago. Don't begin at the beginning. Don't tell your story chronologically. Think of your favorite books. Most don't start at the beginning. Instead, they rivet you with instant action and intrigue. A good beginning sucks the reader in with just enough action to hook them without divulging the outcome. Then it flashes back to the real chronological beginning and fills in the background. Does that make sense? If it doesn't, a little piece of your homework is to go to, well, I don't know if you'll be able to go to a bookstore, but take books off your shelf, fiction and memoir, and look at the beginning. The beginning will be something that really gets your attention, grabs your attention, and that's how you want to start your story. In order to write it, you have to write it, well, you don't have to, but it's the easiest way to write your stories from beginning to end, and then go in and flesh it out, fill it out, so to speak. So you have written your story now from beginning to end. Then you might want to go back and take a paragraph or an incident and put it at the beginning so that the reader is instantly, even though it's your family or a close friend, the reader is instantly riveted and wants to read the story even more than they would have just knowing it, that you've written it. I hope that's clear. Number 8, make your characters colorful and complex. Feel compassion for your characters, even the negative ones. It keeps them from becoming one-sided. I'm writing 2 books right now. I'm writing a memoir about my mom's last 5 years on the earth, which is poignant, and it's funny, and I'm getting to know my mother better through writing it. It's called Anne, Queen of the Wing Chair, and I'll refer to it a time or two during this class. But an example of making your making your characters colorful and complex is that during the writing of this memoir, I have learned a whole lot more about my mother. I've gotten to know my mother better because I have pulled some of her complexities, some of her idiosyncrasies, out of the air and put them in, and it really helps the reader know them much better. I'm also writing a novel called One to Go, an equine thriller, and this is just it's fiction, and it's a thriller, and it's going to be a really fun read. I've just about finished it, but not quite, and I thought I had finished it. The last chapter was it just brought everything together in the book, and my villain came to me after I'd finished this chapter. Your characters do come alive when you write fiction. And he said, that's not going to work. And so I said, what do you know? And he said, I know a whole lot. So he was right. I went back, and it ended up being 3 chapters. And I made him even more colorful and complex than he already was. And he is pretty darn colorful and complex. But it worked much better when I fleshed him out, which I added more of his character in it. All right. Number 9, reach for fresh original language instead of reaching for cliches. Don't settle for parroting other people's ideas. That said, if you're a writer, if you've written much at all, you will know, oh, don't use cliches. You know, everybody knows that's too common writing. But I will tell you this, that if you are writing and a cliche works really well in what you happen to be writing, you might use it anyway. Using cliches or not using cliches is one of those rules of writing that if it's a good idea to follow them, but if you can break them and it works, then it's golden. So just keep that in mind. Don't use them much at all, but if you can use one in a good place, then it's golden, and go for it. Number 10, show, don't tell. You always hear that. What it means is dramatize events instead of summarizing. Take the time to develop scenes instead of rushing through them. Bring your life to writing. And bringing your life to writing means also, it's show, don't tell, and it's also slow down a little bit while you're telling. And I'll get into that here in just a minute. But if you slow down your writing just a little bit, look around. When you're writing, let's say you're in your grandmother's bedroom and you're playing with your blocks on the floor. Look around. Look around. You might see something that surprises you, that you had no idea you remembered. Using your mind to bring your characters to life, to bring your setting to life, is really fun. So have at it. Number 11, write what you know. When writing memoir, it's perhaps more important than in any other genre, as your material comes straight from lived life. All right. Now, number 12 is probably the most important thing I'm going to say to you today as far as how you write your legacy. And I'm going to read it over and then I'll talk about it. To expand on a scene, here it is, to slow it down so the reader can step into it with you. To recreate dialogue and recover details requires a form of time travel that forces a writer to relive the past in all its exhilaration and horror. It means re-entering the hospital room where your father lay dying, or perhaps reliving that battle scene in Vietnam or Afghanistan. This is the most demanding aspect of legacy writing, not the writing itself. The willingness to relive events with honesty, courage, and humility, and then to capture the emotion and articulate it in a language that holds a reader captive. This type of stellar writing creates a line so true that you forget to breathe. I hope you understand what that means. To give you a better example of it, if you've ever read the writer Barbara Kingsolver, her first probably fairly well-known book was called The Bean Trees, but the really big one was Poisonwood Bible. You could sort of see her writing go up a notch with Poisonwood Bible. And whenever I'm reading anything that Barbara Kingsolver has written, I will read a paragraph and I'll think, my gosh, I can't believe how beautifully she said that, and I'll have to go back and read it again. So it always takes me a while to read really good books. And Beaufort's own beloved son, Pat Conroy, was one of those writers as well. Oh my gosh, just beautiful, beautiful writing. But it's tough. It's tough to go back, and it's not as tough to go back and relive a scene in which everyone was happy and you were having a great time, and that's super to do that. However, if you go back to those memories, the memories that make you cringe perhaps, and say, okay, I'm going to write about it. It's really important. It's important for me to write about it, and it could help others, who knows, and it usually does. Then that's pure, 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 wonderful writing. That's well done, because your emotion will be in it, and part of yourself will be in it. That's one reason memoir is so much fun for people to read. I know it is for me. I like to find out, well, I like to live vicariously, looking in other people's windows, so to speak. But you will find, as you read good memoir, that the memoirist has gone back to a time and has talked about the things that helped form them, the things that have made them who they are now, the things that were tough, the things they had to go through. I remember when I was in the 8th grade, I had a little bit of depression, and my dad was chronically depressed. So he knew what it was. My dad was a physician, and he said, okay, Catherine, I think we'll let you stay home from school for a couple of days. And so he said, have you done your homework? And I said, yes, I've done my homework. And he said, okay, you can stay home. And so I was a good student, and I'd done my homework. Well, finally, it was either day 3 or 4 came around, and I was all ready to stay home again. And he said, I think you need to go back to school now. And I really didn't want to do that. And he said, there's something that you need to do. He said, you need to learn how to laugh at yourself. And he said, he told me, he gave me some examples of that, and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't think I can do that. I was in the 8th grade, for heaven's sakes. And so I remember going to school that day, and my first class was biology class, and there was a guy I kind of thought was cool who was sitting next to me. And he said something, I don't remember what it was, and I made a joke that kind of poked fun at myself, and he laughed, and the guy across our biology table laughed, and I thought, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. So helping, make people laugh became a part of what I do in life. I love to make people laugh. Those of you who know me will know that that's true. Anyway, but what I did just then was I divulged something in my past that was a little bit tough at the time. And I mean, that's not that big a deal, but it was to me at the time when I was an 8th grader. So think about that. And expanding on a scene, slowing it down so the reader can step in it with you, going back and reliving the emotion that you felt at the time really brings your writing alive. Okay, number 13. Once you identify a clear beginning, a middle, and an end to your story, you will see that whatever you've been through has a structure, that all the seemingly random, disconnected moments of a life can click into place and begin to make sense. It's like finding a pattern in the quilt of your existence. There you go. I think that's pretty clear. Number 14, be open to embracing a fresh understanding of your life at an age when you think you know yourself pretty well. If you happen to be 15 or 20 years old and you're reading this does not apply to you. These are for those of us who've been on the earth for a little bit of time and now can look back with a different perspective, a fresh perspective on our lives, see what we've learned. Be retrospective. This is number 15. Write, then step back and examine how the story comes together. It's not enough to chronicle your life or experience like a reporter. You must write what you've learned from your experience. That's really important. And that's yet another reason for reading memoir. This is certainly why I like to do it. I like to read memoir who's written by someone maybe that I've heard of, maybe a great musician or maybe a Hollywood actor. And they talk about how they messed up. They will have had a situation in their lives that could reflect a situation that I've had in my life. I want to know how they handled it. Did they breeze through it? Did they just know what to do? Did they use wisdom that they happen to already have to make it turn out well, or did they just mess up and have to make up for it? We're all human, and it's really good for all of us to see the human side of everybody. It brings us all together. All righty. Number 16, release your hold on the ending of the story until you get there. You never can be sure where the process of writing a story will take you. And I do have an example from the memoir, Anne, Queen of the Wing Chair, that I'm writing about my mom. When my mother was about 80, she fell. The electricity had gone off in her house, and she tripped and fell and hit her head hard on a wrought iron table. And she had to have brain surgery to have a subdural hematoma relieved. And she came back even better. That would have been my mother. She would come back even better, but she did. But while she was in the hospital, she had to stay a little while so they could adjust her Dilantin levels. And I remember the very first day that this was going on, a little cute little blonde physical therapist came and took her for a little walk down the hall. You know, they like to get you right out of bed, even if you've had brain surgery, especially if you've had brain surgery. And so my mother, being my mother, she had the best time with this little blonde girl. You know, she entertained the woman with, or the girl with, her stories, and my mother was just very social and outgoing. Well, I happened to be in her room on the second day when a different physical therapist came. This physical therapist was a young Japanese American man, probably in his, I'd guess, in his 30s. And that's who came from physical therapy to take her for a walk. And my mother said, you know, I don't think I'm going to walk today. I just don't feel like walking today. And so I said, you know, Mom, you know, you really want to get up and get out of bed and so you can get home faster. And I cajoled and I pled, and she was having none of it. And I knew trying to talk my mother into something she didn't want to do was like a brick wall. And so I said to the young man, well, why don't you go ahead and go to somebody else's room, and I'll give you a holler when she's ready to walk. And he said, fine. And so my mother and I had a come to it moment. And so I kept on begging, and I kept on pleading, and I kept cajoling, and I could see my mother's jaw getting stiff. And her teeth were set. And when my mother gets to that point, she's not going to back down. And so I said, Mom, you want to go home so you can get nice and strong and get back to your life and see your friends again? And she turned around and looked at me, and she said, I'm not walking with a nip. And that was the first time I'd ever heard anything xenophobic come from my mother's mouth at all. And I thought, oh my gosh, where did that come from? But I said, okay. And I talked to the head of PT at the hospital, and he said, oh, we'll just have the young woman come and walk your mom. And she did, and it all worked out fine, and my mom got home, and like I said, was better than ever. But that always puzzled me, but I went ahead and wrote that chapter in the memoir, and that was kind of the last of it, until about a year and a half or 2 years later. No, actually it was after that, because it was after she'd passed away. She passed away at 85. So after she had passed away, I was teaching a class on memoir writing. And I often, when I'm teaching a class, I will often write along. I'll give a prompt, which you'll find out about shortly. I will give a prompt, and I'll write along with my students. While they're writing, they do a timed 10-minute writing, and I'll write along with my students. So I decided, okay, I'm going to write along with my students, and I chose to, there were part of my mother's college career, that's in quotes. She majored in dating, I think. Anyway, but part of my mother's college life was in a 5-year diary that she left. And so I just read the diary, and I thought, I'm going to just expand upon something I know in the diary. I'm going to pretend I'm my mother. Her name was Anne, and so I'm going to be Anne, and I'm going to just write into this incident at the hospital, which always left me a little puzzled. And so I started writing, and I wrote, you know, this is Anne Albritton, and kept on writing, and I wrote about a young man that I was dating at the time and in college, and I just adored this young man, and he adored me. He was at Annapolis, and they walked under the crossed swords together, and this was going to be it for the rest of her life. And when he graduated from Annapolis, he became a pilot. And his plane was shot down over the Pacific during the Second World War by the Japanese. And that's where it came from. And that's what this writing did for me. And so I changed the ending of that chapter, and it just all made sense. And I hope that makes sense to you. All righty. So you never know how your story's going to end until you get there. We're almost through here. Number 17, before you begin editing, share your first draft with a trusted family member or friend who will be honest about how it reads, not just, oh, this is so good. Oh, you're such a good writer. If you are, that's fine, and they can say that. But you need some feedback with a little teeth in it. Consider their response, but write what you feel works best, being careful not to embellish or exaggerate the truth. Again, as I mentioned before, you are the teller of this story. Okay, number 18, and this is really important. This is all really important, but this is really important. Build your writing muscle. If you want to write, write. Set a daily goal of writing 250 words, which is a page, even 1,000 words, which is 4 pages, at a regular time, and be disciplined. And this is a quote from somebody else, not from me, but I love it, and I use it all the time. Apply butt glue to your chair and sit on it. As a freelance writer, I have to do that a lot. If I have a deadline, just got to put that butt glue on the chair and sit on it, which means just do it. Don't worry about whether the writing is perfect. You can revise it later. Number 19, if the page is entirely too white or blank, the dreaded writer's block that we've all heard about and writers have experienced, pretend you're telling the story to a family member or friend. Write it just as you tell it. It's surprisingly easy. There are no excuses not to write, and that's what they are. They're not reasons, they're excuses. And when you do write and your mind goes blank, it's not a big deal. You just keep on writing. You can write about what you were writing about before or not, but just keep your hand moving. There are no excuses not to write. There aren't. Alrighty, number 20, remember your stories are an important part of the legacy you're leaving in this world. Above all, relax and enjoy the process of writing them. Memoir legacy is the easiest type of writing to do well. You've already lived the experience. Now just tell it like it was. Alrighty. And I want to read this quote. It's not going to be in your handout, but it's a wonderful quote from Beryl Markham. I think we first heard of her when her memoir was published. Her memoir was called West with the Night, and it was kind of refound, let's say back in maybe the 80s, maybe the early 90s, I'm not sure which one, and reprinted. It's just absolutely beautiful writing. She's a writer that Hemingway admired, and Hemingway said his writing was nothing compared to hers. So this is Beryl Markham. Do read the book West with the Night because it's so good. She was brought up British in Africa and was the first woman to fly solo west to east across the Atlantic. No, that's backwards. East to west across the Atlantic. She crash landed, I believe, in Newfoundland, and in her press conference, she has a little Band-Aid on her nose. She was not injured in the crash, but she can just write circles around most of us. All right, here is the quote, and you'll understand this. This is one of the tough parts of writing, legacy writing, or memoir writing, is deciding where to start. That's why the prompt writing that I'm going to explain to you shortly is a really good way to do it because it gives you a prompt and you write about it. But sometimes if you just sit down to write, it's hard to know what to write. So she had the same issue. Here we go. This is Beryl Markham. How is it possible to bring order out of memory? I should like to begin at the beginning, like a weaver at his loom. I should like to say, this is the place to start, there can be no other. But there are 100 places to start, for there are easily 100 names, and I can begin best by choosing one of them. Not because it is first, nor of any importance in a wildly adventurous sense, but because it happens to be turned uppermost in my logbook. After all, I am no weaver. Weavers create. This is a remembrance, a revisitation, and names are keys that open corridors, no longer fresh in the mind, but nonetheless familiar in the heart. I just love that. I'm going to read that very last sentence again. This is a remembrance, a revisitation, and names are keys that open corridors no longer fresh in the mind, but nonetheless familiar in the heart. So you don't have to remember every single detail, but The fact that you remember enough to tell the story is the important part. And once you sit down and start writing, as I mentioned before, you're going to be real surprised at the memories that come back to you. It's really fun, and do it now. All right, how do we do this? How do we do this? Guidelines for writing practice. Okay. I teach what is known as writing practice, a discipline developed by writing workshop guru Natalie Goldberg. She is author of the classic book, Writing Down the Bones. Here it is. Here it is in one form. You can get it in many, many forms on Amazon or anywhere you happen to get books. But it's a wonderful, wonderful read and tells you all about writing practice. What this method is designed to do is to diffuse your self-critic. And I should have mentioned it. The subtitle for Writing Down the Bones is Freeing the Writer Within, because it does relieve you of the self-critic during the time that you're writing. I would think that most of you, hang on just a minute here while I go to here we go, Guidelines for Writing Practice. I'm going to just read this over again. I hope you don't mind. The discipline of writing practice was developed by writing workshop guru Natalie Goldberg, author of the classic book Writing Down the Bones. What this method is designed to do is to diffuse your self-critic. Mine is the voice that some days whispers in my ear, no one will ever want to read that garbage. Writing practice always works for me. When that happens, I always take a break. I will get my journal out because it's important. Some people do write on their laptops or write on their computers for writing practice, but you really need the mind-hand connection for it. So I'll take out my journal and I'll write. I'll start writing, and it just gets my hand moving, and then I'll go back to the story I'm writing and say, this is to you, self-critic. I'm going to write this anyway, and it's good. Thank you very much. The point is to learn to trust your own voice and your own writing process. That's the most important thing. And I want to tell you just a little teeny bit of background. I became a freelance writer about 30 years ago, and I was in corporate. I was director of promotions for a big bookstore in Kentucky, and the pressure had gotten to be too much for me. I'd been doing it for 5 years. It was a very high-pressure job, and so I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And so I went to a Natalie Goldberg workshop. She gives them in Taos, New Mexico. Beautiful, beautiful place. I took a 10-day workshop of Natalie's and came back and became a freelance writer. I decided to quit corporate, and I thought, okay, I'm going to back off of corporate for a while. I'm going to freelance write, give it a shot for 6 months to a year. If I'm not still eating at the end of that time, then I'll go back to corporate, and that was 30 years ago. So Natalie Goldberg really, really helped change my life in a positive way. I've been a freelance writer ever since. Alrighty, so here is how writing practice works. And I'm going to explain it to you as I would to my students in the classroom, and then we'll talk about how you can do it online. All right, I'll give you a topic or prompt. In other words, a word or words to begin. Where you go from there is up to you. The Zen Buddhist, Natalie's the Zen Buddhist, and the Buddhists say first thought, best thought. So you'll have, when I give you this prompt, chances are good you'll have an image flash into your mind. Trust that image and just write about it, whether you think, what in the world is this image doing in my mind? Go ahead, trust it. All right, so when I first mentioned the prompt, an image will appear in your mind. You can trust this image and write about it if you choose. There are no rules about what you write, only how. You can write about anything, but this is the way to do it. All right, the writings will be timed in the beginning, 10 minutes. Okie dokie, here we go. For writing practice, I will give a prompt and then say 10 minutes, go. And then the student will write for 10 minutes. And during that 10 minutes, this is important. These are the rules to remember, and they are rules to remember while you're writing for 10 minutes. Don't look back over what you've written. Keep your hand moving no matter what. And I will say that 10 times probably. Don't look back over what you've written. Keep your hand moving forward. Don't cross out or correct. Crossing out is allowing the judge to dictate what you write. Send that judge outside to play. That's the self-critic, and you are leaving that self-critic behind. The self-critic does not want to be left behind, so you just say, You go outside and play. I'm going to write for 10 minutes, and you come back. I really wish you wouldn't, though. Don't worry about spelling, punctuation, or grammar. When I say go, begin writing and keep on writing until I call time. Write whatever comes as a stream of consciousness. In other words, just keep on writing, keep on writing, keep on writing. All right. If your mind goes blank, let's go back to the, okay, write whatever comes as a stream of consciousness. If, let's see, if your mind goes blank, keep going no matter what. All right, we didn't get quite all this information, so listen very carefully. Keep going no matter what. If your mind goes back, write, if your mind goes blank, write something like, I can't believe with all the words I know in my English language, I can't think of anything to write, and then keep on writing from there. You can go back to the prompt and start all over again, or you can write about the process. Okay, here we are again, or go back to the prompt and begin again, or write about the process. And by that I mean, I'll give you an example of going back to the prompt, or write about the process. You're not used to writing without going back and crossing out. You're not used to writing with saying, oh wait, I know I spelled that word wrong, I'm going to go back and cross it out. But don't do that. There was a man in one of my memoir classes, my OLLI memoir classes several years ago, and he was listening, he was a good doobie, and he was listening during the time that I was giving all the instructions. But I heard him sigh when it was time to start writing. And so I had given him all these directions, and so he wrote for 10 minutes. And then when he started reading, the class just broke out in laughter. He started writing. This process is just crazy. My wife made me come to this class. She said she wanted me to record some of the stories, or all the stories that I've been telling my kids, our grandkids, for years. And golly, I can't believe that I have to sit here and write. He wrote an entire essay in 10 minutes that was just hysterical. So he wrote about the process. You can do that. I mean, you can write, I can't think of anything to say, da, 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 da. You can do that. But chances are really good that you will keep on writing. And another point is that when you write like this, when the self-critic is not involved, your hand is trying to keep up, writing-wise, with your mind, where all the words are flowing and hopefully down into your hand. And sometimes it's hard to read some things that you've written in writing practice. It's really funny. Anyway, the very next point is, all right. The next point is use detail and include sensory input. I've already talked about sensory input. You know what that is and how to practice it. On a bridge, you can do it when you're waiting for a train. You can do it in the doctor's office. Just start looking around and using your eyes, using your ears, using your sensory skills. So be sure to do that when you are writing a story and writing practice. Use your sensory input always. You think, oh, how can I get a story down in 10 minutes by using my sensory input? What if it makes it too long? You do not have to write an entire story. That's the cool thing about writing practice. You're writing a chunk of legacy writing or a chunk of memoir in writing practice in this particular class. So all you need to write is a chunk. If you just get the first paragraph written and you're at the end of 10 minutes, you know, you've covered like a page and a half for the first paragraph, and you say, I just got started, that's fine. Then you go to your computer or to your desk and you finish it. You know, it's a great beginning. Some people write complete stories, they write complete essays. I do that every once in a while in writing practice, not that often, I wish I did. But you don't have to determine in your mind, okay, 10 minutes, I need to finish by now. You don't have to do that. All right. And as far as detail is concerned, detail is really important. Let's see why that is important. Detail is important because, well, who knows? Detail is important. Excuse me, 1 minute here. But detail, I want to just make sure you get everything here. Detail is important because it brings your story alive. Sensory input and detail bring your story alive. When you are writing, don't say there was a dog lying in the driveway. Say there was a 15-year-old coonhound, brown and white spotted, flea bitten, with one ear missing and a blind eye, snoozing in the driveway. Something like that. Or don't say there was a car out in front of my house. Say there was a 1965 ragtop gold Mustang in front of my house. Use detail. See how different that is. I mean, the details and the sensory input really bring your writing to life. Okay, and I'm going to talk once again about tuning out the self-critic. This is really important. And before I do that, I'm going to say keep your hand moving no matter what. Keep your hand moving forward. Tune out the self-critic, and I'm going to quote what Natalie Goldberg said, and I got this straight from her. It's in one of her books. Actually, it's in Writing Down the Bones, but it's also, I wrote it down when I went to her workshop. Give yourself permission to write the worst shit in America, and I don't know if that'll be bleeped or not, but give yourself permission just to write. It doesn't have to be perfect, not even close. And this is coming from a recovered perfectionist. It does not have to be perfect. You have the opportunity to round your story out the way you want to when you take it home or when you go to your desk and finish the story. So do not worry about what's coming out of your pen, just write. All right, here we go. And now, well, I should say any questions, but I can't hear them if you ask them. So those are the rules for writing practice. And then after you have, we're not quite through yet, because after you've finished writing, and I'm not quite sure how this is going to work for you, but it will. When I call time, like I said, I'm talking to you the way I would in class. When I call time, or when your 10 minutes is up, you can set an egg timer. When your 10 minutes is up, then it's important for you to read the story aloud to a fellow writer, a trusted friend, a family member, so someone nearby. And this is before you do any changes to it at all. I heard you thinking about, I'm going to change it before anybody hears it. It's really important for you to go ahead and read what you've written, because you've kept the self-critic at bay now for 10 minutes, and the self-critic will come back and say, well, this is a piece of garbage, you know. You should have written whatever. I mean, you're just not a good writer at all. All that'll come back in, and you won't think that you've written anything that's of any value at all, and it will be. So what we do, and talk to the person that's going to listen to you read aloud, or maybe Facebook another writer. That would be fun. Facebook or Skype another writer, and you can do writing practice over the airwaves. But it's really important, because what we have in writing practice is positive feedback. And so when you have written, then read aloud to someone who is near you, and have that person say, oh my gosh, I can't believe you have described the live oak with the Spanish moss as well as Pat Conroy. Or they can say, you learned to swim in a river, an icy river in Vermont? I did too. Wasn't it awful? It's not that they need to tell you about their experience, but they just need to point out things that stood out for them. It's really important for you to hear that so you can know, yes, my writing is of value. All right? Then, even if you think it's really hard sometimes to just start reading aloud when you're not used to doing that. So what you're going to be tempted to do is called apron ringing. Apron ringing. And apron ringing is those excuses that the self-critic is going to give you. Apologizing before you read is called apron ringing. It's often scary to read something aloud that you've just written that's still raw and unedited and doesn't feel like good work. Ring that apron if you must, or just take the leap and begin reading. Nearly everyone feels insecure before reading an unedited piece. Positive comments will keep that self-critic at bay much longer. There you go. All righty. Let's see if that is all. Yep. Okay, that's all. Those are all the rules for writing practice. And now if you were in my class, I would say, okay, any questions? Let's write. But I'm going to say that to you. What I'm going to do now is, because you're not in the class, I'm sitting in front of a class with many, many empty chairs today, of course. And so what I would like for you to do is I'm going to give you some homework. First of all, well, I guess it's going to all be homework, but to practice writing, you can go online. I'm sure you can go online to Natalie Goldberg's website and find out about practice writing, how to do it. You're welcome to order the book, of course, Writing Down the Bones. But you will have, actually, what's on these screens will be available to you. So just read over the content before you start. And so get your friend or your listener lined up, get your little kitchen timer, and get ready to write. So when the kitchen timer starts, get your friend to say go and just sit there and watch you write for 10 minutes, or they can go do something else, not distract you. Good heavens, no. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a couple of short prompts for you to practice with, and then I'll tell you what the homework is. All right. The first prompt that I always use in memoir and in legacy writing is, I remember. I remember, just those two words, and you can go anywhere you want to with that. And write for 10 minutes. Do not lift your pen. Keep on writing no matter what. You know what to do if you have a mind blank, but often you will not have a mind blank. You'll surprise yourself with the story that comes out. Okay, my second prompt is, I'm proud of. I'm proud of. Write about that for 10 minutes. And then I'm going to give you one other one. My third prompt is, I feel joy when. I feel joy when. Now write those three down. I remember, I'm proud of, I feel joy when. And use each one of those for a separate 10-minute writing practice. And then do them one at a time. After the first writing practice, if I remember, read this aloud to a friend, and then get some positive feedback. Then you can go to the second one, get some positive feedback. Write it and get positive feedback. Go to the third one, I feel joy when. Write it, get positive feedback. Okay, let's see what we have next. Before I give you your homework, I want to give you resources. This is a wonderful, wonderful handout that's coming up. Sorry, it's a screen. This is my very first PowerPoint. So it's a screen. So I'm giving you, there's a wonderful screen that we're getting ready to scroll down to. Resources for creating your own family album with your stories and treasured photos. All the websites that are on this screen are good websites. Let me go to the next one first. All right, this is a lovely young woman named Karen Robeson. You might want to follow her blog. She has a family legacy blog that's really cool, and she helps you put a family book together. Here we go. I began family legacy writing in 2002 with a goal to make a positive contribution to society by preserving individuals' life stories for existing and future generations. My idea for legacy writing came about in 1993 when my mother became terminally ill. I asked her to record her life story to be made into a book, which she did. This project had a dramatic effect on both our lives. Through this event, I knew I had found not only a new direction for my life, but my mission. So she helps other people do this now, and she's very good and very reasonably priced, I might say. I believe my mother's book is the most valuable gift I ever received. It is my passion in life to help others write their life stories. Writing one's stories is an incredible experience with many rewards, healings, closures, and joys. And I believe personal histories are an integral part of an individual's and family's well-being. That's a quote from her. And before I used this particular screen, I sent Karen an email and asked if I could use it, and she said, oh, by all means. She said, I just love helping people with the process. So I think I'd probably go to her. And so let's switch back and see. Um, yeah. Okay. Legacywriting.com is her website. There you go. Another, and then I've added a few more websites that can help you put a book together so you can compare prices if you want to. I think that I'm going to go to Karen for hers because it just looks really good and easy and it's not terribly expensive. But another one is blurb.com, and then there's Karen's legacywriting.com. Milkbooks.com, mpix.com, shutterfly.com, snapfish.com, walgreens.com, and you can go on from there with the .coms because there are a whole lot of places to get these done. But what I know about these websites that I've included are that they are all good. And not all the websites, as you know, that are on the internet today are good, but these are websites that are good and can be trusted with your information. Alrighty. And one thing that this reminded me of before I give you your homework, because I love to give homework, one thing I forgot to mention in my writing of my memoir about my mother, the Anne Queen of the Wing Chair, is during this time that I've been writing this memoir about her, I've gotten to know her so much better. It's just such a gift. So there you go. There's my recommendation. Okay, here is your homework. Could we have a drum roll? Ta-da! The first quote that I read, the very first screen about legacy writing by John F. Evans, it's just, I didn't know really who he was. And so I just Googled legacy writing and he came right up. And you might want to go to Google him. His name is John F. as in Frank Evans. And he's with the Duke Integrative Medicine Department, and he teaches writing for health. Because this type of writing that we're doing, legacy writing, can help improve your mental, physical, and spiritual health. It's great stuff. So another pat on the back to you for choosing to take this class or to listen to this class. Okay, here is our homework for OLLI Legacy Writing, sorry. Okay, legacy narrative, and this is all from John Banks, all of this. All right, legacy narrative. Following are a number of legacy writing springboards. Write a short story about yourself on one of the topics. Write for at least 20 minutes, choose another and write again. Repeat as often as desired. Later, you may decide to write for a longer time and write about more topics. Many people report a shift in perspective when they think about how their response reflects their values and purpose. Okay, here are your topics. I'm going to just read through them. They're up on your screen. And you can go to the Google site. That OLLI members can go to the Google site, which you have a passcode for, and you can see all of these handouts / screens. Here we go. Here are your options, and my suggestion is you write about all of them at some point, and you're going to have yourself a nice chunk of legacy writing then. Here they are, your rites of passage, or one that was especially meaningful. What an important experience taught you, how something changed your life, your dreams attained, your frustrated dreams, your fondest memories, things you looked forward to in the past and things you look forward to now, how you handle the difference between expectations, challenges, and frustrations, what makes you get up in the morning, what keeps you up at night, how you unwind or how you don't, what makes you resilient, what 5 words you wish people would use when they describe you. Aren't those terrific? I have not done this yet, but I seem to have a little bit of time on my hands for writing, a little bit more for writing these days, so I intend to do this entire list. It's really going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. And you have a choice. I mean, I'm going to suggest to you that when you write one of these, this is your homework, that if you were in my class, you would need to bring it back the next time we meet and read it aloud to the class. So I would suggest that as you finish each one of those, you read it aloud to your listener, whoever that may be. All righty. Let's see if there's anything else. I think that's all. All righty. OLLI members can post any questions, comments, or writing assignments on the Google Classroom. I just think this is a great idea. Thank you so much for tuning in. Happy writing. Take care.